something about them. So I think it's really invaluable to get support and also expertise as well, and have a service that can be a real point of call in anything from just getting information, peer support, and also navigating the health system. So as Kate mentioned, I'm an occupational therapist. I've been an OT, and I've really only ever worked in oncology for the last 15 years. I started my career at Peter Mac, up on the wards, but also doing a lot of outpatient things with all different types of cancers. Spent some time at the Newton John Cancer Centre for a number of years. Back to Peter Mac, and then probably for the last 5 or 6 years, I've been doing a lot of work with people after cancer treatment has finished in survivorship, but also for people who are managing a cancer as a long-term thing, and as a chronic disease. So yeah, again, really important to think about. As Kate mentioned, everyone might be managing a very different type of disease, but you all come to this from a different age, from a different previous level of health, wellbeing, fitness, working, not working, caring roles, not caring roles. All these things are thrown into the mix of what makes you what is a meaningful life for you. So what I'm gonna talk about today is cancer-related fatigue as a starting point, but also what we can do about that to manage our energy levels or improve our energy levels if possible, so we can spend more time doing the things that we want to do and enjoy doing, and also the things that we have to do, because life doesn't stop when these sorts of things unfortunately do happen. So feel free to, I'll go for about 20 minutes if that's all right, and feel free to interject and ask questions and queries, and yeah, we'll have plenty of time for questions at the end. I suppose one of the first things to say is, in talking about this subject, it is really pitched quite broadly, because this cancer-related fatigue in and of itself is such an individualised experience. You can have somebody with the same type of disease, the same doctor, same treatment, same management, same age, have vastly different side effects from that perspective. So it's important to get a broad understanding of what it is, which then allows you to combat or manage this side effect as best as possible in your own unique circumstances. So these are the things that we'll touch on today, and I'll also talk about my clinic as well at the end, and what we do and how we do it, and if you can access it and would it be appropriate for you. So this is the definition of cancer-related fatigue from the National Comprehensive Cancer Network in the US. Stress and persistent subjective, tends to tie the symptoms related to cancer and its treatment. It's not proportional to recent activity and interferes with usual functioning. So I've highlighted the red parts of that definition, because they're the really important parts of it, particularly subjective, so it's very different for different people. Again, at the same time, diagnosis, treatment, very different experiences. It's not proportional to recent physical activity or recent energy expenditure. I'm sure if you're not in it, I'm sure that you experience already that stage. And for me as an OT, the really important part is how is this impacting in your everyday life? And that's the really juicy part of, if it is impacting on your everyday life, then what can you do about it? So that's what we want to talk about today. I won't go through this in a huge amount of detail, but really just to point to the fact that your energy levels have so many things that can affect them in the clinical experience and in the future. It can be the disease itself, obvious treatment burden, and that can be surgery, chemotherapy, immunotherapy, radiotherapy, hormone therapy, more psychosocial aspects, and a few of those are listed there. And then also, and this is probably particularly pertinent from that, there's a lot of the medical things that can arise from having this type of cancer. So that's a really important thing to acknowledge, because I'm sure a lot of you
and really sort of getting community and everything. And, you know, I can sometimes take that as one of the work to recover from. Does that sound alright? Is that any of those sort of related to anything? Anything like that? And really the important part about that is just to sort of try and think more broadly. You know, I'd love to, you know, I've often been asked the question when doing this talk to lots and lots of different people, you know, what is there one sort of magic thing that we can do to improve our energy levels and to ameliorate these side effects? And the short answer is no. Yeah, we have to take a broader health and wellbeing approach. So we'll touch on that today. I wanted to talk about language, and if the language we use around is important, and I do think it is. And whenever I talk about cancer-related fatigue or get asked to talk about it, I try and start to use words more like energy, and it may seem like a sort of small and insignificant sort of thing, but it'll make a little bit of sense later on in the presentation. So, what is energy? The strength and vitality required to sustain physical and mental activity, and the property of matter to perform work. So that's your everyday life. Tiredness is superficial. Tiredness is not the opposite energy, it's a form of low energy. Energy can be high and low, it can be stored or exerted. And again, going back to me as an occupational therapist, this is the really important part. And again, thinking broadly, it is what does your individual life look like? What's that in context? Are you working? Are you trying to run a marathon on the weekend? Are you looking after kids and grandkids? Are you volunteering 5 days a week at the local Red Cross? All of these things are very much individual to you. So these are the task demands. So the tasks require energy, and your overall function is that equation between inputs and outputs. And this sounds quite simplistic, but this can get really complicated in a situation where you're managing any type of cancer, but particularly one on a longer term that can have many different bumps in the road and different trajectories. Have I lost anyone with that? Does that sound alright?
Mm.
Yeah. I'll skip over this one. When we talk about improving energy levels and also rehabilitation and managing as best you can in your current circumstance, there is a fair bit of evidence behind this. There's often not huge amounts of evidence related to one particular type of disease versus another, but it's a broad spectrum of evidence. So what does the evidence actually say? So a very recent meta-analysis, so published in March 2017. So a meta-analysis is when researchers will go and pick different research projects that are randomised control trials, and they'll group them all together, and they'll see what are the things that actually worked and what are the things that didn't work, and also how much did these things work versus how little did they work. So as I said, a very recent study. What are some of the things that are actually evidence-based in managing cancer-related fatigue and improving your energy levels? And the number one thing was moderate intensity physical activity. The second most effective strategy was combining moderate intensity physical activity and coping strategies. I'll loosely say coping strategies. They call it psychological therapies. And I'll talk a little bit more about what that is now. The third most effective strategy was coping strategies alone. So essentially what that might be is it might be something as complex as sitting down with a cancer specialist, somebody like myself or a psychologist, and really understanding what your energy levels are, how they play out, and how they play out in context of your disease and its treatment and management. And that might be a really intensive process. I'm doing that with a couple of people at the moment that have had sort of 6 or 7 sessions over about 5 or 6 weeks. Really, you know, a lot of intervention. It might be something as simple as reading targeted information on how to manage your energy levels in a cancer context. It might be somewhere in the middle, which is exactly what we're doing today, which is learning about it in an education session, or a rehab program, a broader rehab program, or a chronic disease management approach. Does that, have I lost anyone there? Does that all sound all right? What's moderate intensity physical activity? Does anyone know? Putting you on the spot, yeah. So low intensity, moderate intensity, and high intensity. Use walking as an example. If you went for a walk around your local park. Low would be if you were walking with a guy with a bottle of alcohol and his dog, and you were still able to have a fully fluent conversation and not have to pause when you're talking to him. So if you did have to pause, if you were really upping your tempo a bit, so your heart rate's getting up a little bit and your breathing's getting up and you're having to pause, that would be moderate intensity. If you were running and you couldn't really have a conversation at all, that would be high intensity. And that's a really important point to make. Kate and I were talking about this before the session, that there's a lot of stuff in the media at the moment around research around exercise and physical activity in a cancer context. But you know, and I made the point to Kate saying, you know, it's great for, say, an oncologist, a haematologist, a surgeon to say you should go out and exercise. But how long is a piece of string? What does that look like? And particularly if you're managing something that cancer-related fatigue is particularly prominent, because it's going to be a significant barrier to completing an exercise or physical
because it can sometimes be I got caught out trying to push myself to keep going with the moderate.
Absolutely, yeah.
And then you suddenly find out that in actual fact, like with me, I had a really low iron. So once I was pumped with some iron, I felt completely different. You know, I had some energy coming up again. So it's sort of like that thing of, and again, mentioning it to your physician or your doctor, whoever it is, that this is occurring.
Definitely.
Because it's finding that fine balance of how to gauge yourself without being a hypochondriac too.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
Because you're going longer than you thought.
Definitely.
So it's that sort of gauging it.
Absolutely.
But being mindful that there could be a reason behind it. And the breathlessness.
And often those reasons, you know, in the research, you will often talk about 2 different groups of reasons. There's the medical physiological sort of reasons, and that's a good example. Low iron, anemia, pain, all sorts of other different things, and then the non-physiological stuff, and that can be general deconditioning. It can be issues with mental health. It could be a number of different things. So addressing some of those medical and physiological things with your treating team or your specialist or your GP if it's something non-related to this, and then looking at the things that are in your control, which you can work on yourself.
Because there is a bit of pressure. It was interesting that you mentioned that.
Definitely.
That everyone's focusing on, like in my street, you know, there are people that my age group or younger that have had cancer, and they're out, you know, and this is what we should be doing, Sally. You know, I'm going, well, I'm struggling a bit, you know, and that's interesting because you do feel that you're not trying hard enough. That can be felt.
Absolutely.
And also, people do jump on these quick fixes.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
It's
a really good point, Sally, that what I often find in my practice is, and this is really particularly pertinent for people that are managing cancer as a chronic disease. So they haven't had breast cancer, they had surgery and chemotherapy, and that's it, and they're done. That's a very different picture to if you're managing something for the rest of your life, and a really different picture from how much can you be pushed from a physical activity perspective, but also not wanting to do not enough. And it is a really fine balance. And what I often find is people are either doing not much at all, so not enough, or they're doing too much.
Yeah. And
sometimes it's just a bit of a support and education piece, and getting access to the right health professionals that know the diseases, know the disease processes, but know how to particularly target and prescribe the right type of physical activity and exercise in your own personal context. So it's not sort of a cookie cutter approach where everyone has to do 30 minutes of exercise every single day and you've got to do weights 4 times a week. It has to be individually tailored to you. Because the other really pertinent point is if you're managing something in an ongoing way, and that's affecting your energy levels, your base load of energy levels. And if you think about it as a car's got a petrol tank. Before you were diagnosed, your petrol tank might have been 100 litres, your engine might have been a V8 engine, and you might have had a Holden sedan as the body of the car. Fast forward however many years, and you might be looking at, instead of the Holden sedan with a 100 litre tank and a V8 engine, you might be looking at a smaller car with a smaller engine and a 60 litre petrol tank. And you don't want to be chewing through your petrol and your petrol tickets, just doing something because somebody else is telling you that it's important, or that you think that it's that you should be doing more of it, at the expense of doing all of the things that you need to do and want to do in your everyday life. Whatever that is, and whatever's meaningful for you. Does that make sense? Yeah.
It's a tricky balance. It's a tricky balance because it could be in your own head too.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
And it is, and it's. I often find a lot of people can adjust over time in their own way.
Yep.
But some people do need help with this, and it can be quite tricky. So it is really important to seek the right advice if you do find yourself in that category, or if your disease changes and the way you were managing that in the past is not working anymore. Yeah. So what are other things that are likely to be effective? And this is a lower level of evidence. So cognitive interventions, energy conservation, activity management, yoga, mindfulness-based stress reduction, psychoeducational programs and rehab programs. And importantly down the bottom, what is not effective? Drug therapies. They've tried a whole bunch of different drugs to try and improve people's energy levels with whole bunches of different types of cancer, and they haven't been found to be effective. Which is unfortunate, because it'd be great if that was the case. I'd be out of a job, but I'd be happy to be out of a job.
Isn't that why they prescribe Dex for some people?
Yeah, but it doesn't work from a cancer-related fatigue perspective. There's a whole bunch of other reasons why you might have dexamethasone and some of those other types of drugs. But from an energy levels perspective, it's been shown not to work, unfortunately. Yeah. We've touched on a little bit of this stuff already, but how does this apply to me? So what are some of the things that you can do? So getting informed about cancer-related fatigue, getting informed about some of the processes involved in this picture, multiple hits to cardiorespiratory function. Quick sort of survey, how many people have had surgery here for their, chemotherapy, get your hand up, radiotherapy? So multiple hits to your cardiovascular system. There's a lot of research coming out. So the reason why you see a lot of that exercise stuff in the media these days is when they first started to do that research, what they really looked at was how does systemic and targeted cancer therapies affect your cardiovascular fitness. And so using breast cancer as an example, what they found with a short 3-month chemotherapy regime, if they measured people's cardiovascular fitness before treatment and then after, you could get anywhere between a 10 and 30% drop in your cardiovascular fitness, which sort of equates to your energy levels, because the fitter you are, the better your energy levels are going to be. It makes a little bit of sense. And so what they ended up doing with that research is saying, well, that's not great. Can we stop that dip from happening? And also after treatment's finished, can we improve
improve our cardiovascular fitness? And the answer is yes, which is good. Realistic recovery time. Again, sort of touching on your point, Sally, about sometimes getting pressure from all different areas about how quick you need to recover from whether it's a surgery or a course of radiotherapy or clinical trial. Somebody mentioned the clinical trial before. This can be really, really tricky to get an idea about what sort of time frame is my specialist sort of giving me to recover from that. So that's a really important piece, and that goes to you don't want to be doing too much too early, but you don't want to be doing not enough for a long period of time as well. And also just taking a general well-being and self-management approach as well. Diet, exercise, psychological and mental health and well-being. All these things are really, really important, and sometimes can be put on the back burner a bit, particularly when you're dealing with rare cancers that are really, really complex. We sort of sometimes, we drill down all the way into the cellular level for a lot of the intracellular level of a lot of these cancers, but they're not happening in isolation. They're not just happening under a microscope. It's you and your body and your life in your context. So really thinking a broader, what are the things can you do from your own health and well-being perspective. Energy mapping. I'll talk a little bit about energy mapping. How long? What about? This is something that I do with a lot of people who will identify as having some barriers to, I don't feel like I can just jump into an exercise program or a generic gym program. And really what this is looking at mapping your everyday